Art in London is flourishing. Engravers in particular are wanted. Every engraver turns away work that he cannot execute from his superabundant employment. Yet no one brings work to me. I'm content that it should be so as long as God pleases. I know that there are many works of a lucrative nature in want of hands. Other engravers are courted. I suppose I shall have to go a-courting, which I shall do awkwardly. I know my execution is not like anybody else's. I do not intend that it should be so. None but blockheads copy one another. I do not pretend to engrave finer than Albert Dürer, but I do pretend to engrave finer than Strange, Woollett, Hall, or Bartolozzi, and all because I understand drawing, which they understood not. Englishmen have become so used to the journeyman's undecided bungle that they cannot bear the firmness of a master's touch. Every line is the line of beauty. It's only fumble and bungle which cannot draw a line. This is only ugliness. That is not a line which doubts and hesitates in the midst of its course. In this way, the English public have been imposed on for many years under the impression that engraving and painting are something else besides drawing. Painting is drawing on canvas. Engraving is drawing on copper and nothing else. And he who claims to be a painter or an engraver without being a master of drawing is an impostor. We may be very clever as pugilists, but as artists, we are and have long been the contempt of the continent. Gravelot once said to my master Bazir, "The English, they may be very clever in their own opinions, but they do not draw the draw." Woollett I knew very well from his intimacy with Bazir. I knew him to be one of the most ignorant fellows I ever knew. He did not know how to grind his graver. I've made a drawing for the Reverend Dr. Trussler in my best manner. He sent it back with a letter full of criticisms in which he says that it accords not with his intentions, which are to remove all fancy from his work. I despair of ever pleasing one class of men. And unfortunately, our authors of books are among this class. How soon we shall have a change for the better, I cannot prophesy. Dr. Trussler writes, "Your fancy, from what I have seen of it, seems to be in the other world, the world of spirits, which accords not with my intentions, which, whilst living in this world, wish to follow the nature of it." To which I replied, "Reverend Sir, I really am sorry that you have fallen out with the spiritual world, especially if I should have to answer for it. I had hoped that your plan comprehended all species of this art, and especially that you would not regret that species which gives existence to visions of eternity. I find more and more that my style of designing is a species unto itself." He says, you want someone to elucidate your ideas. Well, you ought to know that what is grand is necessarily obscure to weak men. That which may be made explicit to the idiot is not worth my care. The wisest of the ancients considered what is not too explicit as fittest for instruction, for it rouses the faculties to act. My style of design is unique, and in this which I sent to you have been compelled by my genius or angel to follow where he led. Had I acted otherwise, I would not have fulfilled that for which I alone live. I attempted every morning for a fortnight to follow your dictate, and when I found that my attempts were in vain, I resolved to show an independence which I know will please an author more than slavishly following the tracks of another, however admirable those tracks may be. I know I begged of you to send me your ideas and promised to build on them. Here I counted without my host. I now find my mistake. I perceive that your eye is perverted by caricature prints, which ought not to abound as they do. Fun I love, but too much fun is of all things the most loathsome. Mirth is better than fun. And happiness is better than mirth. I feel a man may be happy in this world. And I know that this world is a world of imagination and vision. I went to the Garden of Love and saw what I never had seen. A chapel had been built in the midst, where I used to play on the green. And the gates of the chapel were shut, and "Thou shalt not" writ over the door. So I turned to the Garden of Love that so many sweet flowers bore, and I saw it was filled with graves and tombstones where flowers had been. And priests in black gowns were walking their rounds and binding with biers all my joys and desires. I do not pretend to paint finer than Raphael or Michelangelo or Giulio Romano or Albert Dürer, but I do pretend to paint finer than Rubens or Rembrandt or Correggio or Titian, because they did not understand coloring. How long must I be forced to beat this into men's ears? They say there's no straight line in nature. That's a lie. There is every line in nature. I'll tell them what is not in nature. An even tint is not in nature. Nature's shadows are ever varying. An even tint produces heaviness. It's the same with every object in a picture. Its spots are its beauties. I do not shrink from the comparison in either relief or strength of color with either Rembrandt or Rubens. There's no difference of effect in their paintings. When you have seen one, you have seen all. On the contrary, I court the comparison and fear not the result. Their effects are in every picture the same. My effects are in every picture different. Rembrandt was a generalizer. Poussin was a particularizer. He knew better than to make every one of his pictures of the same light and shadow. That vulgar epigram in art, Rembrandt's 100 Guilders, has entirely put an end to all genuine and appropriate effect. All, both morning and night, is now a dark cavern. It is the fashion. It is monotony. Character and expression can only be expressed by those who feel them. Mr. Blake repeats that there is not one character or expression in this print that can be produced with the execution of Titian, Rubens, Correggio, Rembrandt, any of that class. Rubens' Luxembourg Gallery is confessed on all hands to be the work of a blockhead. It bears this evidence in its face. Bloated gods, Mercury, Juno, Venus, the rattletraps of mythology, the lumber of an awkward French palace, are thrown together with clumsy and rickety princes and princesses, higgledy-piggledy. Can I speak with too much contempt of such contemptible fellows? If all the princes in Europe, as Louis XIV or Charles I should patronize such blockheads, then I, William Blake, should decollate and hang their souls as guilty of mental high treason. Yeah. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine, and into my garden stole. And the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. Wandered through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every cry of infant's fear, in every voice, in every band, the mine-forged manacles I hear. And how the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. But most through midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's ear and blights with plagues the marriage hearse.
This is Piccadilly Circus. Change here for Piccadilly line.
I behold London, a human, awful wonder of God. He says, return, Albion, return, I give myself for thee. My streets are my ideas of imagination. Awake, Albion, awake, and let us all awake up together. My houses are thoughts, my inhabitants affections, children of my thoughts, walking through my blood vessels, in dreams of darkness, while my vegetating blood through veiny pipes rolls dreadful through the furnaces of Los and the mills of Satan. For Albion's sake, for Jerusalem, the emanation, I give myself, and these, my brethren, give myself for Albion. Thus spoke London, immortal guardian. I heard in Lambeth's shades, in Felpham, I heard and saw the visions of Albion. I write in St. Moulton Street, South Moulton Street, what I both saw and heard in regions of humanity in London's opening streets. Away to sweet Felpham, for heaven is there. The ladder of angels descends through the air, and at his own door the hermit does stand, dispensing unceasing to all the wide land. To Thomas Butts, friend of my angels, we were safe arrived, having moved house from London to our cottage in Felpham, near to the sea, without accident or hindrance 10 days ago. We had 7 different chaises and as many different drivers, all upon the road with cheerfulness and welcome. We traveled through a most beautiful country on a most glorious day. My wife and sister are both very well. I have begun to work. Felpham is a sweet place for study because it is more spiritual than London. Heaven opens here on all sides are golden gates. The sweet air, the voices of the winds, and trees and the birds, the odors of the happy ground make it a dwelling for immortals. I thank you for your very beautiful and encouraging verses which I count as a crown of laurels, receive from me a return of verses, such as Felpham produces by me, and which I cannot resist sending to you. To my friend Butts I write, my first vision of light. On the yellow sands sitting, the sun was emitting his glorious beams from heaven's high streams. Over sea, over land, my eyes did expand into regions of air, away from all care, into regions of fire, remote from desire. The light of the morning, heaven's mountains adorning in particles bright, the jewels of light distinct shone and clear. Amazed and in fear, I each particle gazed, astonished, amazed. For each was a man, human formed, swift I ran. For they beckoned to me, remote by the sea, saying, each grain of sand, every stone on the land, each rock and each hill, each fountain and rill, each herb and each tree, fountain, mountain, hill, earth and sea, cloud, meteor and star, are men seen afar. I stood in the streams of heaven's bright beams, and saw Felpham sweet beneath my bright feet. And in soft female charms, and in her fair arms, my shadow I knew. And my wife's shadow too, and my sister and friend. We like infants descend in our shadows on earth, like a weak mortal birth. My eyes more and more, like a sea without shore, continue expanding, the heavens commanding, till the jewels of light, heavenly men burning bright, appeared as one man, who complacent began my limbs to enfold in his beams of bright gold, like dross purged away all my mire and my clay. Soft consumed in delight, in his bosom sun bright I remained. Soft he smiled, and I heard his voice mild, saying, this is my fold, O thou lamb horned with gold, who awakest from sleep on the sides of the deep. On the mountains around the roarings resound of the lion and wolf, the loud sea and deep gulf. These are guards of my fold, O thou lamb horned with gold. And his voice faded mild. I remained as a child. All I ever had known before me bright shone. I saw you and your wife by the fountain of life. Such the vision to me appeared by the sea. As a man is, so he sees. As the eye is formed, such are its powers. Dr. Trussler certainly mistakes when he says that visions of fancy are not to be seen in this world. To me, this world is one continuous vision of fancy and imagination, and I feel flattered when I am told so. I seize the fairy harp, I strike the strings. At the first sound, the golden sun arises from the deep and shakes his awful hair. The echo wakes the moon to unbind her silver locks. The golden sun bears on my song, and 9 bright spheres of harmony rise round the fiery king. The glory of woman is the death of her most best beloved, who dies for love of her in pangs of adoration and fierce torments of jealousy. The lover's night bears on my song, and the 9 spheres rejoice beneath my powerful control. They sing unceasing to the notes of my immortal hand. The solemn, silent moon reverberates the living harmony upon my limbs. The birds and the beasts rejoice and play, and everyone seeks for his mate to prove his inmost joy. Furious and terrible, they sport and rend the nether deep. The deep lifts up his rugged head, and lost in infinite humming wings, vanishes with a cry. The fading cry is ever dying, the living voice is ever living, for everything that lives is holy. And the source of all life descends to be a weeping babe. And the earthworm renews the moisture of the sandy plain. And now I stretch my hand to the earth beneath, and I strike the terrible strings, and I wait sweet joy in dens of sorrow, and plant a smile in the forests of affliction, and wake the bubbling springs of life in regions of dark death. Dr. Trussler, I see everything I paint in this world, but not everybody sees alike. To the eyes of a miser, a guinea is more beautiful than the sun. And the tree which moves some to tears of joy is, in the eyes of others, a green thing that stands in the way. Some see nature all ridicule and deformity. Some scarce see nature at all. But to the eyes of the man of imagination, nature is imagination itself. Thou perceivest the flowers put forth their precious odors, and none can tell how from so small a center come such sweets, forgetting that within that center eternity expands its ever-during doors, which org and anak fiercely guard. First, ere the morning breaks, joy opens in the flowering bosoms. Joy even to tears, which the sun arising dries. First, the wild thyme and meadow sweet, waving among the reeds, light springing on the air, downy and soft, lead the sweet dance. They wake the honeysuckle, sleeping on the oak. The flaunting beauty revels along upon the wind. The white thorn, lovely May, opens her many lovely eyes, listening. The rose still sleeps, none dare to wake her. And soon she bursts her crimson curtained bed and steps forth in the majesty of beauty. Every flower, the pink, the jessamine, the wallflower, the carnation, the jonquil, mild lily, opes his heavens. Every tree and flower fills the air with innumerable dance, yet all in order, sweet and lovely. Men are sick with love.
Ah, sunflower weary of time, you come just the steps of the sun, seeking after that sweet golden clime, where the traveler's journey is done, where the youth pined away with desire, and the pale virgin shrouded in snow arise from their graves and aspire, where my sunflower wishes to go.
Thou hearest the nightingale begin the song of spring. The lark, sitting upon his earthy bed, just as the morn appears, listens silent. Then, springing from the waving cornfield, loud he leads the choir of day, trill, 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 mounting upon the wings of light into the great expanse, re-echoing against the lovely blue and shining heavenly shell. His little throat labors with inspiration. Every feather on throat and breast and wing vibrates with the effluence divine. All nature listens silent to him. And the awful sun stands still upon the mountain, looking on this little bird with eyes of soft humility and wonder, love and awe. Then loud from the green covert all the birds begin their song. The thrush, the linnet, the goldfinch, robin and the wren wake the sun from his sweet reverie upon the mountain. The nightingale again essays his song, and through the day and through the night warbles luxurious. Every bird of song attending his loud harmony with admiration and love.
Holy Virgin, glad and purest white, unlock heaven's golden gates and issue forth. Awake the dawn that sleeps in heaven. Let light rise from the chambers of the east and bring the honey dew that cometh on waking day. O radiant morning, salute the sun, roused like a huntsman to the chase, and with thy buskined feet appear upon our hills, appear upon our hills, appear upon our
Oh, oh yes, yes. Tiger, 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 burning bright in the forest of the night. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry, it doesn't matter. Burnt in distant deeps and skies, the cruel fire of thine eyes, could heart descend or wings aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire, and what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet could fetch it from the furnace deep? And in thy horrid ribs dare steep, in the well of sanguine oh, no. Ah! 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 Oh! Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings did he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart. And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer? What the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil? What dread grasp? There its deadly terrors clasp. When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Yes, I'll print that. How is it possible? How is it possible that a man almost 50 years of age, who has not lost any of his life since he was 5 years old, without incessant labor and study, how is it possible that such a one of ordinary common sense could be inferior to a boy of 20 who scarcely has taken or deigned to take pencil in hand, but who rides about the parks and saunters about the playhouses, who eats and drinks for business, not for need? How is it possible that such a fop could be superior to the studious lover of art? Cannot be explained. Yet I dance and sing, for if on earth neglected, I am in heaven a prince among princes, and even on earth beloved by the good as a good man. And this I should be perfectly contented with, except at certain periods a blaze of reputation arises around me, in which I am considered as one distinguished by some mental perfection. But the flame soon dies down, and then I'm left stupefied and astonished. Oh, that I could live as others do in a continuous succession of employment. I fear this wish is not to be granted to me. Why was I born with a different face? Why was I not born like the rest of my race? When I look, each one starts. When I speak, I offend. Then I'm silent and passive and lose every friend. Then my verse I dishonor, my pictures despise, my person degrade, and my temper chastise. And then the pen is my terror, and the pencil my shame. All my talents I bury, and dead is my fame. I'm either too low or too highly prized. When elate, I am envied. When meek, I'm despised. Sweet Mary, the first time she ever was there, came into the ballroom among the fair. The young men and maidens around her throng, and these are the words upon every tongue. An angel is here from the heavenly climes, or else does return the golden times. Her eyes outshine every brilliant ray. When she opens her mouth, 'tis the month of May. Mary moves in soft beauty and conscious delight to augment with sweet smiles all the joys of the night, nor once blushes to own to the rest of the fair that sweet love and beauty are worthy our care. In the morning the villagers rose with delight and repeated with pleasure the joys of the night. And Mary arose among friends to be free. But no friends from henceforward thou, Mary, shalt see. Some said she was proud, some called her a whore, and some when she passed by shut to the door. A cold damp came o'er her. Her blushes all fled, her roses and lilies are blighted and shed. Oh, why was I born with a different face? Why was I not born like this envious race? Why did heaven adorn me with bountiful hand, and then set me down in an envious land? To be weak as a lamb and smooth as a dove, And not to raise envy is called Christian love. But if you raise envy, your merit's to blame for planting such seeds in the weak and the tame. I will humble my beauty. I will not dress fine. I will keep from the ball, and my eyes shall not shine. And if any man's lover forsake her for me, I'll refuse him my hand, and from envy be free. She went out in the morning, attired plain and neat. Proud Mary's gone mad, said a child in the street. She went out in the morning in plain, neat attire. She came home in evening, bespattered with mire. She trembled and wept, sitting on the bedside. She forgot it was night, and she trembled and cried. She forgot it was night, she forgot it was morn, her soft memory imprinted with faces of scorn, and eyes of disdain, like foul fiends inhabiting Mary's mild brain. She remembers no face like the human divine. All faces have envy, sweet Mary, but thine. And thine is a face of sweet love and despair. And thine is a face of mild worry and care. And thine is a face of wild terror and fear that shall never be quiet till laid on its bier. An angel came to me once and said, "Oh, you disgusting young man, how horrible, dreadful state. Consider the hot, burning dungeon thou art preparing for thyself to all eternity, to which thou art going in such a career." I said, "Well, perhaps you would be willing to show me my eternal lot, and then we may contemplate together upon it and see whether your lot or mine is most desirable." So he took me through a stable and through a church and down into the church vault, at the end of which was a mill. Through the mill we went till we came to a cave, and down the winding cavern we groped our tedious way, till a void, boundless as another sky, appeared beneath us, and we held to the roots of trees and hung over this immensity. But I said, "Let us commit ourselves to this void, if you please. See if Providence is here also. If you will not, I will." He said, "Do not presume, O young man, for as we here remain, behold thy lot, which will soon appear as the darkness passes away." So I remained with him, sitting in the twisted root of an oak. He was suspended in a fungus, which hung with the head downward into the deep. We gradually beheld the infinite abyss. Fiery as the smoke of a burning city. Beneath us, at an immense distance, was the sun, black but shining, and round it were fiery tracks on which revolved vast spiders, crawling after their prey, which flew, or rather swum, in the infinite deep, in the most terrific shapes of animals sprung from corruption. The air was full of them and seemed composed of them. I now asked my companion which was my eternal lot. He said, "Between the black and white spiders." But now, from between the black and white spiders, a cloud and fire burst and rolled through the deep, blackening all beneath, so that the nether deep grew black as a sea and rolled with a terrible noise. And beneath us was now nothing to be seen but a black tempest. And looking east, between the cloud and the waves, we saw a cataract of blood mixed with fire, and not many stones' throw from us appeared and sunk again the scaly folds of a monstrous serpent. At last, to the east, distant about 3 degrees, we saw a fiery crest above the waves. Slowly it reared like a ridge of golden rocks, until we discovered 2 globes of crimson fire, from which the sea fled away in clouds of smoke. And now we saw it was the head of Leviathan. His forehead was divided into streaks of green and purple, like those on a tiger's forehead. And soon we saw his mouth and red gills suspended just above the raging foam, tinging the black deep with beams of blood, and rushing toward us with all the fury of a spiritual existence. friend, the angel, climbed out of his station into the mill. I remained alone, and then this appearance was no more, and I found myself sitting on a pleasant bank beside a river by moonlight, hearing a harper who sung to his harp, and his theme was, "The man who never alters his opinions is like standing water and breeds reptiles of the mind." But I arose and sought for the mill, and there I found my angel, who, surprised, asked how I escaped. I said, "All that we saw was owing to your metaphysics, for after you ran away, I found myself sitting on a bank by moonlight, hearing a harper." But now that we've seen my eternal lot, let me show you yours. He laughed at my suggestion, but I, by force, gathered him in my arms and flew through the night westerly till we were high above the earth's shadow. And here I flung myself with him directly into the body of the sun. Here I clothed myself in white, and taking in my hand Swedenborg's volumes, descended from the glorious climes and passing all the planets till we came to Saturn. And here I stayed to rest, and then leapt into the void between Saturn and the fixed star. "Here," said I, "is your lot in this space, if space it may be called." And soon we saw the stable and the church, and I took him up to the altar, and I opened the Bible, and lo, it was a deep pit into which I descended, driving the angel before me. And soon we saw 7 houses of brick. One we entered, and in it were a number of monkeys and baboons and all of that species, chained by the middle and grinning and snatching at one another, but withheld by the shortness of their chains. However, I saw that they sometimes grew more numerous, and then the weak were caught by the strong, and with a grinning aspect first coupled with, and then devoured, by first plucking off one limb and another, until the body was left a helpless trunk. And this, after grinning and kissing it with seeming fondness, they devoured too. And every now and then I saw one savorily picking the flesh off his own tail. Oh, that's the stench! So annoyed us both, we went into the mill, I taking in my hand the skeleton of a body, which in the mill was Aristotle's Analytics. "Now, fantasy has imposed upon me, and thou oughtest to be ashamed," said the angel. I said, "We impose upon one another, and it is but lost time to converse with you, whose works are only analytics." I have found that angels have the vanity to speak of themselves as the only wise. This they do with a confident insolence springing from systematic reasoning. Men are not admitted into heaven because they've curbed or governed their passions, or because they have no passions, but because they've cultivated their understandings. The treasures of heaven are not negations of passion. They're realities of intellect from which all the passions emanate in their eternal glory. "The fool shall not enter into heaven, be he ever so holy." Holiness is not the price of admission into heaven. Those that are cast out are those who, having no passions of their own, because no intellect, have spent their lives curbing or governing those of others through various arts of poverty and cruelty of all kinds. Woe, woe, woe to you hypocrites! There's no interval, but I invite you now to rest your eyes for 2 minutes and meditate on this London, my London, your London, where just a couple of stones throws away is St. James's Church, Piccadilly, where I was baptized. The font is still there. To the north in Soho, 28 Broad Street, not there anymore, but I was born there, and round the corner 28 Poland Street, where, for the first time, these words dropped from my pen.
I wander through each charted street, where the charted Thameses flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, of mine forged manic tones I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church upholds, and the hapless soldiers sigh, the runs in blood down Calais walls. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, of mine forged manic tones I hear. But most in the midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlots curse, blossom newborn infants dear, and blight with plagues the marriage hearse. Blossom newborn infants dear, and blight with plagues the marriage hearse.
What is the price of experience? Do men buy it for a song, or wisdom for a dance in the street? No. It is bought with the price of all that a man hath. His house, his wife, his children. Wisdom is sold in that desolate market where none come to buy, and in the withered field where the farmer ploughs for bread in vain. It's an easy thing to triumph in the summer sun and in the vintage, and to sing on the wagons loaded with corn. It's an easy thing to talk of patience to the afflicted, or to preach the laws of prudence to the houseless wanderer, to hear the hungry raven cry in the wintry season, when the red blood is filled with wine and the marrow of lambs. It's an easy thing to laugh at wrathful elements, to hear the dog howl at the wintry door, the ox in the slaughterhouse moan, to see a God on every wind and a blessing on every blast, and to hear the sounds of love in the thunderstorm that destroys our enemy's house, to rejoice in the blight that cuts off his field, the sickness that cuts off his children, while our olive and vine sing and laugh round our door, and our children bring fruits and flowers. Then are the pain and dollar quite forgotten, and the slave grinding in the mill, and the captive in chains, and the poor in prison, and the soldier in the field, where the shattered bone hath laid him groaning among the happier dead. It is an easy thing to rejoice in the tents of prosperity. Thus could I sing, and thus rejoice. But it is not so with me. A robin redbreast in a cage puts all heaven in a rage. A dove house filled with doves and pigeons shudders hell through all its regions. A dog starved at his master's gate predicts the ruin of the state. A horse misused upon the road cries to heaven for human blood. Each outcry of the hunted hare, a fibre from the brain does tear. A skylark wounded in the wing, a cherubim does cease to sing. The gamecock clipped at arm for fight doth the rising sun affright. Every wolf and lion's howl raises from hell a human soul. The wild deer, wandering here and there, keeps the human soul from care. The lamb, misused, breeds public strife, and yet forgives the butcher's knife. A truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent. It is right it should be so. Man was made for joy and woe, and when this we rightly know, through the world we safely go. Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy of silken twine. Every night and every morn, some to misery are born. Every morn and every night, some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to sweet delight, some are born to endless night. We are led to believe a lie when we see not through the eye that was born in a night to perish in the night, while the soul slept in beams of light. God appears, and God is light to those poor souls who dwell in night, but doth a human form display to those who dwell in realms of day. Thinking as I do that the creator of this world is a very cruel being, and being a worshipper of Christ, I cannot help but say, oh, the Son, how unlike the Father. First, God Almighty comes with a thump on the head, and then Jesus Christ comes with a balm to heal it. I really am sorry to hear that my countrymen are so troubled with politics. If men were wise, princes could not hurt them. If they're not wise, the freest government is compelled to be a tyranny. Princes appear to me to be fools. Houses of lords, houses of commons appear to me to be fools. They seem to me to be something else besides human life. And here is in red from each book of brass. Listen, O daughters, to my voice, listen to the words of wisdom. So shall ye govern over all. Let moral duty tune your tongue, but be your hearts harder than the nether millstone. Compel the poor to live upon a crust of bread by soft, mild arts. Smile when they frown, and frown when they smile. And when a man looks pale through labor and abstinence, say he looks healthy and happy. And when his children sicken, let them die. There are enough born, even too many, and our earth will be overrun without such arts. If you would make the poor to live in temper, with pomp, give every small gift you give. With gracious cunning, magnify small gifts. Reduce a man to want a gift, and then give with pomp. Say he smiles if you hear him sigh. If pale, say he is ruddy. Oh, preach temperance. Say he's overgorged and drowns his wit in strong drink, even though you know that bread and water are all he can afford. Flatter his wife, pity his children, till we can reduce all to our will, as spaniels are taught with art.
Pity would be no more if we did not make somebody poor, and mercy no more could be if all is happy as we, and mutual fear brings peace till the selfish loves increase. Then cruelty knits a snare and spreads his baits with care. He sits down with his holy fears and waters the ground with tears. Then humility takes its root underneath his foot. Soon spreads the dismal shade of mystery over his head, and the caterpillar and fly feed on the mystery, and it bears the fruit of deceit, ruddy and sweet to eat, and the raven his nest has made in its thickest shade. The gods of the earth and sea sought through nature to find this tree, but their search was all in vain. There grows one in the human brain.
The ancient tradition that the world will be consumed in flames and at the end of 6,000 years is true, as I have heard from hell. For the cherub with his flaming sword is hereby commanded to leave his guard at the tree of life. And when he does, the whole of creation will be consumed and appear infinite and holy, whereas now it appears finite and corrupt. This will come to pass by an improvement of sensual enjoyment. But first, the notion that man has a body distinct from his soul is to be expunged. And this I shall do by printing in the infernal manner, using corrosives, which in hell are medicinal and salutary, melting apparent surfaces away and revealing the infinite which was hid. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through the narrow chinks of his cavern.
There is a smile of love, and there is a smile of deceit, and there is a smile of smiles, in which these two smiles meet, and there is a frown of hate, and there is a frown of disdain, and there is a frown of frowns, which you strive to forget in vain, for it sticks in the heart's deep core, and it sticks in the deep backbone, and no smile that ever was smiled, but only this smile alone, that betwixt the cradle and grave, it only once smiled can be, and when once it is smiled, there's an end to all misery.
I stood among my valleys of the south and saw a flame of fire, even as a wheel of fire, surrounding all the heavens. It went from west to east against the current of creation and devoured all things in its loud fury and thundering course round heaven and earth. By it, the sun was rolled into an orb. By it, the moon faded into a globe, traveling through the night. For from its dire and restless fury, man himself was shrunk into a little root, a fathom long. I asked a watcher and a holy one its name. He said, "It is the wheel of religion." I wept and said, Is this the law of Jesus, this terrible devouring sword, turning every way? He said, Jesus died because he strove against the current of this sword. Its name is Caiaphas, the dark preacher of death, of sin, of sorrow, of punishment, opposing nature. It is natural religion. But Jesus is the bright preacher of life, creating nature from this fiery law by self-denial and forgiveness of sins. Go, therefore, cast out devils in Christ's name, heal the sick of spiritual disease, pity the evil, for thou art not sent to smite with terror and punishment all that are sick, like to the Pharisees, but to the publicans and harlots go, teach them true happiness, and let no curse go forth out of thy mouth to blight their peace, for hell is open to heaven. Thine eyes beheld the dungeons burst and the prisoners set free.
Of the sleep of Ulro, and of the passage through eternal death, and of the waking to eternal life.
This theme calls me in sleep night after night, and in the morning wakes me at sunrise, and then I see the Savior over me, spreading his beams of love and dictating the words of this mild song. Awake, awake, O sleeper of the land of shadows. Awake, expand. I am in you and you in me, mutual in love divine, fibers of love from man to man through Albion's pleasant land. In all the dark Atlantic vale, down from the hills of Surrey, a black water accumulates. Return, Albion, return. Thy brethren call thee, and thy fathers, and thy sons, and thy nurses, and thy daughters, and thy sisters, and thy mothers. Weep at thy soul's disease, and the divine vision is darkened. Where hast thou hidden thy emanation, O Jerusalem, from the vision and fruition of the Holy One? I am not a God afar off. I am a brother and friend. Within your bosoms I reside. You reside in me. Lo, we are one. Forgiving all evil, not seeking recompense. Ye are my members. O ye sleepers of Beulah, land of shades. But the perturbed man away turns down valleys dark, and saying, we are not one, we are many. Thou most simulative phantom of the overheated brain, shadow of immortality, seeking to keep my soul a victim to thy love. My mountains are my own, and here I will keep them to myself. I will build my own laws of moral virtue. Humanity shall be no more, but princedom and war and victory. Albion's mountains run with blood. The cries of war and tumult resound through the unbounded night. Every human perfection of mountain and river and city are small and withered and darkened, trembling. I sit day and night. My friends are astonished at me, yet they forgive my wanderings. I rest not from my great task, to open the eternal worlds, to open the immortal eyes of man inwards into worlds of thought, into eternity. But you have so openly and generously desired that I should divide my griefs with you, that I cannot hide what has become my duty to explain. As my dependence is on engraving at the moment, I find on all hands great objections to my doing anything but the mere drudgery of work, with intimations that if I do not confine myself to this, I shall not live. This has always pursued me. You'll understand from this the source of all my uneasiness, for that I cannot live without serving up treasures of heaven is certain and determined, to which I've long made up my mind. And my objection should be made to me about this, when drunkenness, lewdness, gluttony, even idleness itself does not hurt other men. Let Satan himself explain. The thing I have most at heart, more than life or all that seems to make life comfortable without, is the interest of true religion and science. And when anything appears to affect that interest, especially if I myself neglect any duty to my station as a soldier of Christ, it gives me the greatest of torments. I'm not ashamed, afraid, or averse to tell you what ought to be told, that I am under the direction of messengers from heaven daily and nightly. But the nature of such things is not, as some suppose, without trouble or care. Temptations are on the right hand, on the left hand, behind. The sea of time and space roars and follows swiftly. He who keeps not straight onward is lost. And if we lose our footing in the clay, how can we do otherwise but fear and tremble? But if we fear to do the dictates of our angels, if we tremble at the task set before us, if we refuse to do spiritual acts because of natural fears or natural desires, who can describe the dismal torments of such a state? I too well remember the threats I heard. If you, who are organized by divine providence for spiritual communion, refuse and bury your talents in the earth, sorrow and desperation pursues you through life, and after death, shame and confusion of face through eternity. Everyone in eternity will leave you aghast at the man who was crowned with honor and glory by his brethren and who betrayed their cause to their enemies. You will be called the base Judas who betrayed his friends. Such words would make any stout man tremble. And how then could I be at ease? But I'm no longer in that state. And now carry on with my task, fearless. And though my path is difficult, have no fear of stumbling while I keep it. The nature of my work is visionary and imaginative. It is an attempt to restore what the ancients called the Golden Age, to cast aside from poetry all that is not inspiration, to cast off the idiot questioner who is always questioning but never capable of answering, who sits with a sly grin, silent, plotting when to question like a thief in a cave, who publishes doubt and calls it knowledge, whose science is despair, whose pretense to knowledge is envy, and whose whole science is to destroy the knowledge of the ancients, to feed ravenous envy that rages round him like a wolf without end. Rouse up, all ye young men and women of the new age, painters, I call upon you, sculptors, architects, artists of all kinds. Set your foreheads against the ignorant hirelings, where we have hirelings, in the courts, in the camps, in the universities, who would, if they could, forever depress mental and prolong corporeal war. The last judgment will be when art, science, imagination, all the gifts of the Holy Ghost are looked upon as no use, and only contention is left to man. That's when the last judgment begins. Not fable or allegory, but vision. Fable or allegory is a totally distinct and inferior kind of poetry, born out of the daughters of memory. But vision, imagination, is a representation of what eternally exists, really and unchangeably, and is surrounded by the daughters of inspiration, which in the aggregate are called Jerusalem. A last judgment is necessary because fools flourish. That is a last judgment when men of real art govern and pretenders fall. Dr. Trussler, I'm very happy to find a majority of my fellow mortals able to elucidate my visions, and I'm especially happy that they've been elucidated by children who've taken a greater delight in contemplating my pictures than I even hoped. Youth or childhood is not incapacity. I mean, some children are fools, but so are some old men. But there is a vast majority on the side of vision, imagination, and spiritual sensation. I give you the end of a golden string. Only wind it into a ball. It will lead you in at heaven's gate, built in Jerusalem's wall. And did those feet in ancient times walk upon England's mountains green? And was the Holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen? And did the countenance divine shine forth upon those clouded hills? And was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? Bring me my bow of burning gold. Bring me my arrows of desire. Bring me my spear. O clouds unfold. Bring me my chariots of fire. I will not cease from mental fights, or my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant. Oh, would that all the Lord's people were prophets. I hear a voice you cannot hear that says I must not stay. I see a hand you cannot see that beckons me away. Talks better than I do. Naked we came here, and naked of natural things, and naked we shall return. But while clothed in the divine mercy, we are richly clothed in spiritual, and suffer all the rest gladly. William Blake. Thank you so much.
When the painted bird laughs in the shade where our table with cherries and nuts is spread. Oh, come live and be merry and join with me in the sweet chorus of ha-ha-hee. When the green woods laugh with a voice of joy, and the dimpling stream runs laughing by, when the air does laugh with our merry wit, and the green hill laughs with the noise of it. When the meadows laugh with a lively green, and the grasshopper laughs in the merry scene, when Mary and Susan and Emily with their sweet round mouths sing ha-ha-hee. When the painted bird laughs in the shade where our table with cherries and nuts is spread. Oh, come live and be merry and join with me in the sweet